Hey, I'm Dr. William Attaway, and you are listening to the Head Smack Podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Hey, welcome to the Head Smack Podcast. My name is Paul Povolni, and I have another misfit with me. I have Dr. William Attaway with me, and Dr. William is the CEO of Appreciation at Work and an executive coach specializing in leadership, mindset, and productivity. With over 30 years of experience in leading teams and coaching leaders, he hosts the Catalytic Leadership Podcast, which is ranked in the top 1.5% of shows globally. A leader dedicated to his faith and his family, William has been married to his wife, Charlotte, for 28 years, and they have two exceptional young adult daughters. Dr. William, how do you do, man?
I am great, Paul. Thanks so much for having me on.
I'm looking forward to this conversation. Really enjoyed meeting you at a recent conference, hearing you speak, and then also getting a chance to have dinner with you. So it was a fun time, and I knew I had to have you on the podcast because of some of the things that you've shared and some of the things that you've talked about. And so I think it's going to be a fun conversation.
I have been looking forward to this as well, Paul.
So as you can see behind me, I have superhero stuff. So I love origin stories. I love to hear about how people got started and where they got started. And so tell me a little bit about your origin story. Where did you get your start? And you can go as far back as you want. That would be relevant.
I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, and if you think about my journey with leadership, it goes back to when I was 15 years old. I had a high school teacher who invited me to attend my first leadership conference. I didn't understand why exactly, but he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. I went to that conference, I listened, I learned, and man, I was hooked. I mean, to learn about the power of leadership, for good or for bad, to make an impact, to make a difference. And for pushing 40 years now, I have been studying what makes leaders truly catalytic, what makes them the catalyst that comes into an organization that affects change. And that's a lot of study in the last since those days.
Yeah, wow. And so, so that happened when you were 15, you said?
Yeah.
And so when did you first step into a leadership role?
I led my first team when I was 19. I was working at a drugstore chain, and they started off just as a cashier, stock guy kind of a thing, and kept getting bumped up, and finally oversaw a team there of about 15 different cashiers and about a dozen stock guys. And the goal there was for me to basically do everything from hiring to firing and managing them in between. And that was the first time I'd ever done that at 19 years old.
Wow.
Man, I made more mistakes than I can possibly fit into an episode. I'll tell you what. That's where I started to cut my teeth and understand that there's not a one size fits all when it comes to leading people, because people are different. People are messy. They're wired differently. And you can't just use one method to lead them.
Yeah. So in that experience, I know that's going back a little while, but do you remember some of those early leadership lessons that you started applying that you found, wow, this actually works?
I think one has to do with the how you treat people. I had grown up in a more rigid type of an environment, and so leadership for me was, this is how you do it. There's one right way. That's the way you do it. That's the way you lead.
Yeah.
And so I started managing people the same way, started leading them the same way. And what I discovered very quickly was that I couldn't do that. And I tried. I tried to just say, hey, this is how we do it. This is the policy. This is how we do it here. And man, I remember one individual in particular, and she would not get with the program. She had her own way of doing things.
Right.
And I was like, that's not how we do it. That's not going to work. And she was not timely, right? I mean, she was late all the time, over and over and over again. And I gave up on her. I was like, okay, well, you're done. And I mean, in hindsight, I look back at that and I'm like, man, what if I'd come alongside of her and been more curious, and said, hey, help me understand what's going on here. You're late so much more often than you're on time. What's happening? Instead, I just immediately dismissed. I just immediately was done. Cut, move, next And that's a lesson I've carried with me, that you can't operate with human beings that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing to work with machines that way, but you can't
Right.
do
Right.
that with people.
Right. Especially when it
Curiosity
comes,
wins.
yeah. And yeah, in building relationships and missing that important part of relationship, as opposed to policy, this, that, you're out type thing, makes a big
Yeah.
difference. And so what was your next move into the leadership realm beyond that?
From there, I started working for a telecommunications carrier back in the mid '90s,
Yeah.
and it was, think, early days of cell phones, brick phones, bag phones, right?
Yes. Yes, I remember those. Yes.
So I was in sales, and again, continued to advance in that company, and had a lot of interest in a new division. There was only one person in the division.
Yeah.
It was cellular data. And I was like, oh, I want to be in that. And
Yeah.
it was seriously one guy in that whole division. I was like, I want to join that guy. I want to do this.
Yeah.
And that carrier ended up shutting down that division because they saw no future in it.
Wow.
And that company doesn't exist anymore. Within 5 years, they were gone. They got swallowed up by a competitor. And so as I was advancing in my journey and becoming more and more, I guess, aware of what it means to lead. Leadership is not just a position; it's not just a title.
Right.
Leadership is influence, like Maxwell teaches. And so I think learning how to lead laterally, learning how to lead up was during that season some of the lessons that I was picking up, because I was like, this is a much more corporate type of an environment. What does it look like to lead my peers? What does it look like to lead my boss in some ways?
Right.
Those were lessons that I was learning during that season.
Wow. And so when did the doctorate come into play?
Much later. I had actually dropped out of college twice at that point. Well,
Wow.
I went to school as a pre-pharmacy major.
Mhm.
Got into my second year, hit organic chemistry, and decided this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. It was not fun at all. I did not enjoy that. And so I dropped out and worked for a while. That's when I was working at the drugstore chain. And then I decided to go back and started focusing on some business classes, business degree, but it didn't really ring the bell. And so I dropped out again. And that's when I was working for the telecommunications carrier.
Wow.
And so the journey was not straight by any stretch of the imagination. It was trying to figure it out. But it was during that season when I was in that corporate job that I discovered something that changed the course of my life from that point. That's when I met Jesus. And
Wow.
everything began to change. One of my roommates, I was renting a house with a couple of other guys, and one of them challenged me to get serious about this whole relationship thing. I'd grown up and going to church and knew about Jesus. I just didn't know him.
Yeah.
And it was during that season that happened, and it really changed the course of my life.
Wow. Well, it's amazing how when you look back at your life, you see these little moments, these little walking through a set of doors and choosing one, and how that kind of leads to one thing, leads to another thing, that leads to another thing, that kind of, you look
That's
back. And I think it was Steve Jobs that talked about, we can never make sense of life joining the dots forward. We always make sense joining the dots backwards, that kind
That's
of
right.
see the path that kind of led us to where we're at now. And so,
That's
when
right.
did you start moving into the executive coaching realm?
It really started back earlier than even back in the drugstore days. This is when I started working with leaders even above me, layers
Wow.
above me, started working with them and talking through some of the stuff that I was dealing with. And they started talking back, and they started saying, hey, I'm actually dealing with something, and they wanted me to weigh in and give them some thoughts. And I was like, coaching was not what it is today by any stretch. And so I'm trying to learn while I'm trying to help them navigate. And that's when I began to learn the power of the right questions. And I carried that with me forward. And this is one of the ways that I would use to coach peers, coach even people above me in the chain, but certainly those who reported to me. The right questions coming from a place of curiosity take you so much farther, because you're never going to get the right answer if you don't ask the right question. Most
Right.
people, if they're asking questions at all, they're asking the wrong questions. What I can do is come alongside and help and ask you questions that maybe nobody else in your world is going to ask you to help you
Yeah.
see something that you haven't seen yet. So it's during that season that I started that. So really young, but I wasn't any good at it, of course. So I had to learn, right? I had to,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's the experience. Try, fail, get up, try again,
Right.
and just
Right.
repeat that. But at every point, evaluate. Okay, what went right? What went wrong? What would I do different next time? What do I want to try next time?
Right.
And that iterative process really developed the process that I use today.
Right. Right. Well, and I think, you've touched on something there that a lot of times we don't talk about enough is that, experience alone isn't the best teacher. And,
Oh, yeah,
and as you said, it's evaluated experience. And,
yes,
often I talk about, and we saw it even presented at the conference that we went to, that, it's execute, evaluate, evolve, execute,
that's right.
evaluate, evolve. And a lot of people miss the
That's right.
evaluate.
That's right.
Don't stop and look at what they've gone through and why they failed, and then doing adjustments and then moving forward. And so that's what you've found too, right? With a lot of people.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. The evaluative process is the secret sauce.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
where you really process the learning so that it is available to you in the future. The next time
Yeah.
you're in a similar situation, you don't have to, in that moment, go through and think, what did I do last time? What should I do here? What's the best thing? You don't have to process the learning. You've already done that. You've done
Right.
the evaluative work. Now that's available to you the next time you're in that situation, so you can proceed with what you've already pre-decided.
Right. Now, you had mentioned also about asking questions. And, I think the difference between a professional and an amateur is the questions they ask. And
So
so,
true.
so when you look at the questions that you do ask, I also want to ask you, what are the questions that people ask themselves that are the wrong questions?
Mm. I think one of the questions that I hear a lot is, um, why? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? And they use that word "should" in some very unhealthy ways.
Mm,
You can think about this in a way that actually challenges you to move forward. That's good. That's great. But when you start thinking in the land of should, what happens is I want to know where that's coming from. According to who?
mm.
You should be. I should be further along by now. According to who? Well, I should be able to
Interesting.
do.
Yeah.
According to who? And when I dive into that and when I get curious and we begin to unpack that, what I discover is that usually it's the voices of somebody in their past. Usually it's
Wow.
the voice. It could be a former boss. It could be a coworker. It could be a parent. So many different ways this can be answered. But when we unpack that and we get down to the root of it and say, okay, this is something that you heard from a boss, 30 years ago about you,
Mm,
and you're still carrying that as an expectation of yourself. Is that valid?
wow.
Is
Yeah.
that a valid expectation? Because you're looking at everything through that lens. Let's stop for a second and let's just ask the question: is that valid? And I find that is something that really helps people to understand. Sometimes they're holding themselves to very unrealistic expectations. They're
Yeah.
holding themselves to the standards of somebody else, and they've changed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that expectation is no longer valid, but they're stuck in it. And what I
Wow.
love to do is to help people get unstuck. And I think the right questions do that.
Yeah. So, what are some right questions then that you actually start asking them as opposed to what they
Mm.
ask themselves?
Whenever I start working with somebody, we have to define 2 points. And the first point is, where are you now? And I want to define reality as it is. Max Dupree said that a leader's first job is to define reality as it is,
Mm.
not as you wish it were. Okay. So let's
Right.
define where you are, right? Let's define what is. Then I want to define where you want to be. Where do you want to go? Let's define that. And I want to paint that picture with as many colors and brushes as we can. I find most people have great difficulty with one of those two pictures.
Mm.
They either are not being honest with themselves about where they are. They're thinking, well, I'm painting a picture of what should be true, but it's not
Right.
really.
Right.
Or they don't have clarity around exactly what they want to do, where they want to go. Well, you're never going to get where you want to go without clarity. So we got to
Right.
get clarity on those 2 points first. I find, in my experience, building a bridge from here to there is the easy part,
Yeah.
right? Clarity on those 2 points, that takes some time.
Right. Now, if people are stuck on answering those two questions, how do you dive deeper? How do you start helping them unwrap the answers to those questions?
I think about it like a plane circling an airstrip. All right. I'm gonna I'm gonna come at this from a whole lot of different directions, right? But
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
eventually gonna land the plane, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes I've got to circle for a while
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
just no clarity. And if you can't see the airstrip, please don't try to land, right?
Right. Right.
Keep circling until you do. Brene Brown over in Texas says that at the University of Texas, she says that clarity is kindness. And I love that quote. I think that's so good. Clarity
Yeah.
is kindness with other people, to be sure. Clarity is one of the kindest things you could do with other people. But clarity is kindness with yourself too. And so what I want to do is help people find clarity around those 2 points so that we can help them begin to build that bridge and then begin to execute, then begin to
Yeah.
move.
Yeah.
The best laid plans are great and we can plan all day long, but if you never execute,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
you're never going to get there.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that's the intentions is kind of the place where, ideas go to die because, you
So
have
true.
the desire and the idea, and then you
Yeah.
have the intention, but then you miss executing. And, a lot of people look back and say, you know what, I had that idea 10 years ago, or I had that idea once, and they see somebody succeeding. Well, they executed. And that was the difference, is they actually made it happen as opposed to just intending to make it happen at one point, one day in the future. So let's talk about other areas of mindset that people can sometimes get stuck in, that you talk to them about, or you kind of unwrap for them to have help them to have that clarity to move forward.
I think one of them, Paul, is what you were just talking about, that push forward into action.
Yeah.
I find that a lot of people are waiting for motivation to strike
Mhm.
as though it were lightning, right? And if I just wait for motivation, eventually that motivation is going to strike and then I'm going to move.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. I've never experienced that myself. I don't know about you, but I've never experienced the motivation lightning strike.
Yeah.
What I find is that when I make a decision and I choose to move into action, the motivation follows.
Yeah.
If I wait for the motivation to take a step, I'm going to be waiting from now till Jesus comes. That's like
Yeah.
waiting on lightning to strike, standing outside. Like
Yeah.
you could be there a while.
Yeah.
That is a serious mindset shift. And one of the things, somebody asked me this, Karen Height, who was at the conference, she asked me
Yeah.
this about a month ago. She said, if you could only tell people one thing, what would that one thing be? Wow, what a great question. And I had to think about that for a minute. And I told her, I said, it's this: you get to choose. You get to choose. So often people are positioning and viewing themselves as victims of their circumstances, victims of their past, victims of other people. You get to choose. You get to decide. And that is true when it comes to action. Don't think that you've got to wait for the motivation lightning bolt to strike. That's putting you
Right.
in a victim spot. You have to wait for that to happen to you.
Yeah.
No. You get to choose. You get to decide. The motivation follows.
Yeah. Well, and usually if you're waiting for that motivation to strike, usually that motivation is going to be negative. The bills are coming,
There you go. There you go.
the business is failing.
That's a good point.
So it's usually, it's rarely a positive thing. It's usually a negative thing that is happening in your life that suddenly motivates you. And even if that's the right word for it, to take action because you waited so long for something beautiful to happen, but something came up behind it and said, you've got bills, you've got employees, you've got a business to run, you've got, end of month bills. And then that becomes the driver. Maybe the driver is the better word than motivation, because, it's not an exciting thing. It's usually a negative thing, right?
Yeah. And when you have those negative drivers, how do you feel?
Yeah.
You begin to feel like a victim,
Yeah.
right? And it just perpetuates that mindset. And I believe there's a better way.
Right.
By understanding the power that you have, that you and I have. This is something that I believe God has given us. It is part of our what it means to be created in his image. It's the ability to choose.
Yeah.
I get to choose. So do you. We get to decide. As entrepreneurs, we get to create the environment that we want to live in.
Yeah.
A whole lot of people, and I watch this, I work with entrepreneurs a lot, and I watch this. What they do is they leave a job and then they go and recreate that job in their own business. Okay.
Wow.
That's a choice. Okay.
Yeah.
You are choosing to do that. I don't want to do that. I want to be very intentional about what I'm creating. I want to create the environment that I want to live. And I'm in process of that,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I'm doing with Appreciation at Work, this company that a partner and I just acquired at the end of last year, creating the environment that I want to live in a year from now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's going to take a minute. It doesn't happen by snapping your fingers. Wouldn't it be great if it did? But it doesn't. And so but it takes intentionality. And the thing that I want to communicate so loud and clear is that we get to choose.
Wow. Now, with the intentionality, that for some people is, maybe a stuck point. How do you help them get past, the intention and taking that first step into action and bypassing that intentionality pit that all ideas go to die? What are some ways that you help them to get past that intentionality stuckness?
I'll tell you a practice that I have been doing for 20 years now. I read a book 20 years ago this year by a guy named David Allen. It's a book called Getting Things Done.
Yeah.
And it's on personal productivity. And I got to interview David for my podcast a couple years ago. And that was an incredible honor to get to talk to him and to thank him for the incredible influence he's had on my life. Anyway, that book has a system in it for personal productivity. And I was a productivity junkie growing up. I was the kid with the day timer, in school.
Wow. Oh,
right?
I had one too. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when I went to corporate, like they sent us to the Franklin Day Planner workshop, and like learning how to do a 3-day deal. I was always a student of productivity because I thought if I could make it more efficient, I could get more done. And that was true to a point. But every one of these systems that I tried, Blackberries and Palm Pilots and all these different systems, they were great, but something was missing. And I couldn't quite figure out what it was, but I knew this is okay. It didn't fit quite right until I found David's book. His system is called GTD, called Getting Things Done. And I have been a practitioner of GTD now for 20 years. One of the things that I talk with clients about is the importance of implementing a system. You don't have to use mine. That's fine, right? Or in this case, David's, right? But the thing about GTD is you can adapt it and adjust it for whatever industry you're in and whatever your particular flow is for your work.
Right.
And I think that's phenomenal. And so one of the practices that I use is what he calls a weekly review. And so what the weekly review does is it gives me an opportunity to look back over the previous week and to evaluate, to look at the appointments that I had, the meetings, conversations, and go through it and say, hey, what went right this week? What can I celebrate? And I'm going to capture those wins so that I can celebrate those. We've so often run right past the wins. I want to focus on that.
Right.
Then what went wrong? Where did I swing and miss this week? And what would I do differently next time? I'm going to process that learning as part of the weekly review. Then I'm going to look forward and I'm going to say, in the coming week, here's the appointments that I have scheduled. Here's the conversations that are planned. What do I need to prepare to bring the best version of myself into those environments, those meetings, those conversations? And then I block time to do that. And then I look at this and say, if I only get 3 things done this week, what are 3 things that are going to move the needle? And this is where the intentionality piece is.
Yeah.
I'm going to be intentional, not just about learning from the past, not just about preparing for this week, but I'm going to be intentional about the long-term view. What are the 3 things that if I get these things done by Friday at 5:00, these 3 things are going to make a difference? And I pre-decide what those 3 things are. Then I block time to do that. That intentionality has served me so well because it forces me to pre-decide what those things are. I block the time to do them. And then there's no excuse.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't feel like it today. Doesn't matter. It's blocked on my calendar.
Right.
I'm doing it. I'm not waiting for that lightning bolt of motivation to strike.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think for a lot of people, they also get into a productivity solution cycle of stuckness because they're trying to find the perfect system, and
Yeah.
they're constantly in this state of changing systems and
Yes.
trying new things and trying
Yes.
different things or merging things. But like you said, you found a system that you're stuck to for 20 years. And I've told people, whatever systems actually helps you get stuff done is a good
That's right.
system. Whether it's post-it
That's
notes on the
right.
bottom of your computer screen, whether it's whatever it is, if it's working,
That's
it
right.
works, but you've got to work the system until it doesn't work, and then you find a new system. And so
That's
I think finding something like the getting things done system has served you well because you've stuck to it and it's become a part of your process. But I encourage people not to get stuck in this loop of trying to find the perfect system, having 50 different to-do apps on your phone and
right.
reading book after book and then trying to, work several of them at the same time. You actually end up getting stuck and not
That's
very
right.
productive, you know. And so you've talked
100%.
about it. You've talked about it already, and I do want to take some time to talk about it pretty deeply. Is the appreciation at work, and you said you recently acquired that. Tell me about that. What is that?
So it's a training and development company. It's best known for the flagship book that came out of the company from Dr. Paul White and Dr. Gary Chapman. It's called The Five Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. That book was published about 15 years ago now, and it has sold now pushing 900,000 copies.
Wow.
Uh,
Wow.
Today, it still sells about 3,000 copies a month. There it is, right there. It still sells about 3,000 copies a month, right?
Wow.
15 years after publication. What makes a book resonate like that? And the answer is that what's in that book makes a difference. 79% of people who quit their job do not quit because of pay. They do not quit because of benefits or PTO. 79% of people, according to the research that we have, say they quit because they did not feel appreciated.
Wow.
That is a solvable problem, Paul.
Yeah.
We can
Yeah.
fix that. As business owners, as leaders, we can fix that. And so often people want to throw money at the problem, and they think money is going to be, and 89% of managers and leaders and business owners say they think people are leaving their team, their company, for more money.
Right.
You know what the actual number is? 12%.
Wow.
12% are leaving for more money.
Yeah.
That's a huge gap. Like, what are we doing? What we're
Wow.
doing is ignoring the real problem. And the real problem is that people don't feel appreciated. Everybody speaks a language of appreciation, and this is what the book talks about. And this is what we teach. We try to help companies and businesses understand the power of what so many see as a soft skill, but it is a soft skill that when you apply this framework in your team, in your organization, what we see on average is a 22% increase in productivity. No additional headcount. Just a 22% increase in productivity. I don't know a business owner or leader who would not be interested in that.
Yeah.
We have worked with companies all around the world, Procter & Gamble, Caterpillar, Meta, Tesla, the Savannah Bananas, the list is long. And what we're trying to do is take what we have learned over 15 years of research and help people understand that this works no matter the size of your team or your company.
Yeah.
It works with teams of 3. It works with teams of 3,000. But we have to apply it. If we don't make this part of our culture, part of our DNA, then we're going to continue to see what we have been seeing, which is high churn, high turnover. And that is the single greatest non-productive cost for any company.
Wow. Well, and I think a lot of people, when they exit a company, they might say it's the money, but if you had a chance to really deep down interview them, it is that appreciation. They feel like their existence doesn't matter in the company, and therefore they're going to try and find another company where they actually matter at. And so it's a great topic. And so when people talk about appreciation, what does that actually look like, and where do companies get it wrong? What do companies think appreciation means, and what are people actually looking for?
There's a conflation of two ideas. 94% of companies in the U.S. have recognition and rewards programs. where, you're going to, get a gift card. You're going to get a certificate, a trophy, a plaque, an award of some kind. Maybe it's for a larger company, it's a trip. These are the recognition and rewards programs that companies are so accustomed to. And they are based on performance. When you hit your sales goals and you exceed them by this much, you are recognized for that. That's wonderful. And we are not at all saying we should not measure, track, and reward performance, because I think that's important.
Yeah.
As a business owner, I think we have to do that. But that is incomplete. Recognition and rewards are about performance. Appreciation is about the person. And when people don't feel seen and heard and known, they do not feel valued and they do not feel appreciated. And this is why people begin to disconnect from a team or eventually from a company. What we want to do is help you understand how to marry these things, how to continue to measure your metrics. That's important. KPIs, KRAs, these are important. But understand the value of appreciation. And when you couple those things together, that's when you see the productivity leap. That's when you see the results. Yeah. And you're building, in essence, what you're doing is you're building a healthy and sustainable culture over time. The old traditional adage, that people don't leave a company, they leave a boss.
Right.
I understand the mindset there. I would tweak it just a little bit. I don't think they leave a boss as much as they leave a culture that boss creates.
Yeah.
And most cultures are so focused on performance that they treat the people like cogs in a machine.
Wow.
Nobody wants to be a cog in a machine.
Right. Well, because you feel replaceable, you feel not that valuable because somebody else can be plugged in and you don't feel appreciated for your skills and talents that you might be bringing to the job. So what are some ways, and you kind of mentioned a couple there, what are some positive ways to show appreciation that isn't, just a slap on the back, attaboy type thing? What are some positive ways to show appreciation at work?
There are the 5 languages that we talk about in the book are the 5 ways that people receive. They're wired to receive appreciation. If you look at our stats, we've had about 480,000 people now take our assessment.
Wow.
And from that data set, which is a significant research data set.
That's amazing. Yeah.
44% of those say that their language of appreciation is words of affirmation. But understanding how that actually looks matters. For instance, a whole lot of people think, just, hey, Paul, good job, man. Great job. Okay. Good job is what you say to your dog. Okay. Hey, good job. Come on back inside. You did good. Well done. You went outside. That's not helpful. Yeah. For something to be truly words of affirmation means that they are specific, they are personal, and they are focused on communicating the impact or the outcome. Right? So this would look like something like, hey, Paul, man, I can tell you put so much time and energy into that presentation with that client. And I just want to let you know the feedback that we have gotten is so positive. They know that we are the right company to work with them. And that's because of what you did. And we're going to get this account because of you, man. Way to go. What have I done? I've made it personal. I've communicated exactly what I saw. You feel seen. You feel known.
Right.
And because I communicated the outcome, you feel valuable. That's words of affirmation, right? Yeah. When you teach people to communicate like that, the words of people who have words of affirmation, man, they're like, oh, I'm fired up, ready to go.
Yeah.
You get that kind of feedback. If that's your language, man, your tank is full.
Right.
But 44% of people have that as their language, which means 56% of people don't. And I think this is where you can't just use one tool in the bag. One size does not fit all. If that's the only thing you're doing, you're going to miss more than half your team statistically on average. And that's why it's important to know all 5 languages, to understand that there are different ways that people receive and appreciate or feel appreciation. Another one is quality time, right? And this is interesting because this one has dialects that seem fairly clearly based on generation. So I'm a Gen Xer, right? Yeah. So for my generation and the one before me, the boomers, quality time for us usually meant quality time with our boss, our supervisor, our leader. This was the mentoring relationships, right? This is when we would really feel invested in. That was quality time for us. But if you look at generations after Xers, millennials, Z, and even the early signs of A, what we're seeing is that quality time does not mean quality time with you as the boss. Quality time for them means quality time with their peers.
Wow.
And that's an interesting distinction. And I was speaking with a company in North Dakota yesterday and talking with them about this. And when I got to this point, they all laughed because they knew exactly what I was talking about. And it was yesterday was May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo, and so they were having a Mexican themed lunch right after that session. And I said, what you're doing at that, you're going to gather, you're going to eat, you're going to laugh and talk, and you're probably not going to talk about work the whole time.
Yeah.
I said, that's the quality time I'm talking about. That's what that is. It's a time for you to get together and to know and be known, to see and be seen by other people. That's when you're building those relational bonds that help you make it through the stressful seasons that all of us have in the workplace.
Right.
So that when people feel like you're pouring into them, it could be a one-on-one. That could be that. But when I say quality time, that's where people's minds really go most of the time. It's one-on-one. Who's got time for all that? Okay. It's not just that. That's one way to do it. But you need to focus on what the individual wants. Every one of the languages is based on what the recipient wants, not the giver.
Wow. Well, and I think a lot of businesses, and it's valuable, they do DISC assessments and different kinds of assessments like that, but I don't think about an appreciation assessment, a one that deals with the culture. And, the culture is so important. As you mentioned, people don't leave a business for the reasons they sometimes tell you they leave a business. They usually leave it because of the culture. And so I think this is so valuable in talking about these. And I do want to hear the other three as well. But, DISC assessments are great and those personality assessments are great. But understanding how people feel cared for and loved and appreciated, I think is the missing link for a lot of businesses. They don't think that that's important. But I think, as you're saying, the generation that is coming up into the workforce, this is going to be pretty critical. This kind of thing is going to be incredibly valuable for them. And if you miss it, you're going to have a tough time building a business that works because your culture is broken.
That's exactly it. You have a culture today. Your business, your team, your organization has a culture. You either have one that you designed on purpose, intentionally, that you guard and protect, or you have one that you inherited or didn't mean to have.
Right.
But you have a culture.
Right.
I want to help you be intentional about what you're building. I want you to build something healthy that is sustainable over time, that is going to create high retention and low churn. That's going to create a sense of camaraderie that people lean into. When people feel seen, heard, and known, they lean in. When they feel valued, they lean in and they stick around because that's unusual. That's what we want to help companies do.
Yeah. Well, and when we had dinner last, I guess, a couple of weeks ago, I'd shared some of my thoughts about culture as well, and I'm actually speaking on it in a couple of weeks at a large event. And so, for me, culture is cultivated, and it kind of aligns with what you said there. A culture is cultivated. The culture that you have is either because you've nurtured it or you've neglected it. And, what you're talking about is nurturing the culture. And sadly, for a lot of people, they don't consider culture that important, and they get the culture they have because of neglect. It's what defaults. If I neglected my garden, I'll get weeds, I'll get pests.
That's right.
I'd get things growing that I don't want to grow. I'd get things growing that are choking the things that I do want to grow. And that's from neglect. And so when you nurture it, as this does, and this is so valuable, and I encourage everybody to, get the book, do the assessment, check, and I'll have links at the end of the episode in the show notes, is check this out because this is so valuable for any business to understand that in 2026 and beyond, this is going to be the key differentiator between success and failure is understanding appreciation.
That's exactly what we believe, Paul.
Yeah.
We believe that you have the culture that you have allowed.
Right.
You have a culture that you've tolerated.
Right.
What if you were intentional and designed the one you want?
Right. And so let's talk about the third thing. What is the third area of appreciation that people respond to?
Yeah. So the third language is acts of service, right? And about 1 in 5 people have acts of service. They're gonna respond this way. What does this look like in the workplace? Well, if I see you struggling with a project and you were in the deep weeds, man, you were swamped. I'm going to come over to you. If your language is acts of service, I'm going to come over to you and I'm going to say, "Hey, Paul, and it looks like you are just swamped. Is there a way I can help? Like, how can I step in here? Would it be helpful if I did this, if I took this off your plate and handled this for you? Would that be helpful to you?" I'm asking permission because you always ask permission because you want it to be something that the person wants. It has to be the effectiveness of the language is determined by the recipient. Always ask permission, but you say, "I want to demonstrate my appreciation in a tangible way with
Yeah.
you. I want to demonstrate this in a way that's going to help you with your current problem." For somebody with acts of service, and they're going to light up like a Christmas tree.
Yeah.
Oh, that would be so helpful. Oh my goodness, that would be so great. You really sure you don't mind? Oh, thank you so much. Like they're going to feel again seen, heard, and known.
Well, then I think with that is what you shared is that you've also got to be very specific. As we talked about, even the
Yeah.
other two is being very specific because I've seen people say that, "Hey, if there's anything I could ever do, just let me know," and then it's like crickets. Like you don't.
Right.
They've
Right.
said that, but it was just a thing to say. But what you shared there is actually being very specific. Was can I take this thing off of you? Can I, be very specific about what you're willing to help them out with?
That's
Makes a
right.
big difference, right?
That's exactly it. The more specific and the more personal, the more effective.
Yeah, yeah. And so as we go into the next one, what is that?
Mhm. So the fourth language is tangible gifts. This is what you typically see in a recognition and rewards program. This is the gift cards, this is the certificate, the plaque, the trophy, the trip, whatever it is. And that's great. But 9% of people say that tangible gifts are their language of appreciation. 9%,
9%. Yeah,
which means for 91%, that is not hitting the mark.
yeah,
This is the problem. 94% of companies have this as their primary methodology for engaging their employees. And it's only the language of 9% of the people in the room.
wow, wow,
That's why we have to think about this strategically and intentionally. For your people, who are tangible gifts, that's their language. Great. Do that. Make it happen. But again, be personal and specific. A generic broadcast email telling them, "Hey, it's wonderful," that they can print out and put up in their cubicle, probably not going to be the thing, right?
yeah,
But, man, I just want to communicate. I know you've been putting in some long hours, and I want to give you a gift certificate so you and your spouse can go out and have dinner. Like, that's a tangible gift. It
right,
communicates
right,
that I have seen what you've been doing. I know what you've been struggling with, and I want to step in and show appreciation. That's a tangible gift,
yeah,
especially if you know their favorite restaurant.
yeah,
You can dial
yeah,
it in even a
yeah,
little tighter
yeah,
there.
yeah,
There's ways to do all of these that are personal and that are specific, and that's where you're going to get the most bang for your buck.
right, right. One thing that's kind of stood out to me in this is, while you talk about appreciation at work, but I think the work of appreciation needs to be considered. It's going to take some work to do this.
It is.
And so, while you talk about the appreciation at work, the work of appreciation is going to take some work from leadership, from managers. They're going to have to be very intentional about what they're doing. They're going to have to up their skill set. Because the work of appreciation is not just a default for most of us. For most of us, it is that attaboy slap on the back. It's the, "Hey, if I can help in any other way, let me know, and I'm out of here," type thing. It's
Yeah.
the work of appreciation. I think is something that somebody needs to be thinking about as well. Is changing the way you train your leaders, you train your managers to
Yes.
actually work at this appreciation because it's going to take some very intentional effort.
It is. You have to be intentional about this. And that's probably the biggest pushback I get from people who are like, "Look, I'm busy enough. I don't need one more thing to do."
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're on the road, if you stay on the road you're currently on, you're going to continue to get the results you're currently getting.
Right.
You happy with that? Change is going to get different results.
Right. Right.
One of the things we do is we come alongside teams and leaders. We pour into them with continued training and resources as you walk this journey so that you are not alone and you're not having to figure it out. We're going to give you the best practices based on the hundreds of companies that we've worked with. We're going to say, hey, we've seen this work over here. Might try this.
Yeah.
We do weekly training with the companies that we work with because we want to see them win. We want to see them make this part of their culture, part of their DNA. And that takes time.
Right. Well, and you're not making this stuff up because you got 500,000, respondents, that have said these are the things that are important. So let's take this in for a landing. What's the fifth one?
So the fifth one is the one that usually causes a chuckle at best or some discomfort at worst. That's physical touch. And these are all based on Gary Chapman's 5 Love Language book, right? Physical touch in the workplace obviously looks very different than physical touch in a marriage. Okay.
HR is perking up their ears. They're perking up their ears. Okay, where's he going to go with this right now?
So physical touch in the workplace is a fist bump. It's a high five at the end of a project. It's a slap on the back. That's the type of physical touch. And some people, this is their language. This is what they do.
Yeah.
But statistically, it's less than 1% of people. It's a very small percentage.
Yeah.
But it does exist. And this is why we talk about it. And when somebody, this is their language because they're the first one to give the fist bump and the high five.
Right.
This is what speaks their language. Okay. As a leader, you need to be mindful of that.
Yeah.
But you have to make sure that it is appropriate and that it is welcomed.
Right.
We've all seen and heard of instances where a physical touch in the workplace was done in a harmful way. And people have experienced all manner of pain and hurt and trauma from this. And that is not at all what we're after. This is why the recipient determines how they want to be appreciated.
Yeah.
And the leader, the manager, the supervisor, the peer responds to what their desire is.
Yeah.
If this is not, and you can tell when somebody's not interested in this. When you go in for the fist bump, they're like,
yeah.
You do a side hug and they're like,
Right.
You know that. And that's why this needs to be a conversation. We need to be open about this so that we can speak the appropriate language in the appropriate way.
Yeah. Well, and you kind of mentioned something there very briefly that I think is very key as well, is that usually somebody's language of appreciation is the way that they show appreciation. And it's a good clue into what their language is, what their mode or how they receive appreciation is, how are they showing it to others. And so if you see somebody that's always ready for the fist bump, that's always ready for the handshake, the pat on the back, the side hug, then maybe that is the way they want to be appreciated. And if you see somebody constantly bringing cookies and gifts and whatever for the workplace, maybe that's their language. But there is an evaluation that you also offer businesses that they can get as well, that can really dial that in and help people get better understanding. So tell us a little bit about that I can't believe how quickly time has gone as we wrap this up. What's the best way for them to get a hold of you and to start this process of getting the right systems in place, the right things in place?
Yeah, so you can find us at appreciationatwork.com. This is kind of the home hub of everything that we do. We have the books. We have 5 different books. We have the assessment for the 5 languages, and we have companies taking this every day. Who are saying, we want to know how our people want to be appreciated. And, this is small law offices and this is large hospital systems. This is some small businesses that are a handful of employees, and this is, manufacturing plants. What our goal here is for you to have the information first, first to know yourself, then to know your team and your organization. And we do a group summary report. We offer that so you can see everybody on your team, in your unit, your division, whatever your department, so you can see what their languages are, as well as what their desired actions are based on their language, and the actions that they don't desire based on their least valued language. That's helpful information if you're leading somebody. So we provide all those resources. We do training for people who are internal to an organization. So HR often we'll train them to be a trainer for their team. And then they will take that and they will begin to implement that. I also speak and write and talk to people all over the place, really, about this, because we want to help people understand the information first, then understand the importance of applying it and what it looks like for them to execute on this information. Information never leads to transformation. Information plus execution leads to transformation.
Right.
That's
right,
what we want to see.
Right. So what's a question that you wish I'd asked you, or a head smack that you want to share as we wrap this up?
What a great question. I think a question that I wish you had asked me. We never finished earlier. I did go back to school. I dropped out twice. I did go back eventually and followed that path and did a bachelor's and a master's and a PhD. And people often assume what that PhD is in. And so I think it's interesting to talk about that for a second. What's my PhD in? It's in archaeology and biblical backgrounds. And so I spent a couple of seasons on a dig in Jordan in the Middle East.
How cool.
And so that's always kind of an interesting thing.
Well, thank you so much for this. This has been amazing. Such a great conversation. I believe it's had a lot of head smacks for a lot of people, a lot of business owners, a lot of, and from, like you mentioned, whatever the size is. I mean, if you've got just a couple of people, why not get something like this implemented early on in your business, because it's going to be set on the right footing. And if you're a larger business, 20, 30, 50, 100, 1,000, you definitely need to do something like this to make sure that you're not losing people for reasons that could be avoided. And so I appreciate you coming on, Dr. William, and this has been an amazing conversation. And I appreciate everything that you're doing. I appreciate your friendship and getting to know you more, and then look forward to just watching this adventure as you guys take this company to heights that you never imagined. So thank you very much. Having a great day.
Paul, thanks for having me on.
You are listening to Conversations with Misfits, Mavericks, and Trailblazers.